welcome back to the X-Ring. So on today's episode, what we're going to do over the next couple of days is take a look at a new thermal company. You guys might not have heard of them before. It's called Fusion Thermal. And we are in Eagle Lake, Texas. This is called the Sandy Creek hunting, basically hog hunting. And I've never been hog or boar hunting in my life, just flew in from Vegas here. You guys got to see the video on that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. First off, big shout out to all my patron subscribers. Appreciate each and every one of you. So what makes this different? Well, we're going to get into all that as the video progresses over the next couple of days, and they've got some really unique technology. I will tell you, after spending about 15 or 20 minutes with it, the user interface is easier than any other thermal I've ever used. I'm really going to be able to put this to the test. I know that we are planning on shooting at further distances with these units, not just 50 and 100 yards, but literally 500, 600, 700 yards, hopefully. So this is the Avenger 55XR. This unit runs retail about $5,700, and it has some really cool features on it. Multiple reticles, multiple profiles, user profiles, and so I'm really looking forward to this review of the Fusion Thermal. We are using rifles outfitted by, or basically the rifles are provided by Sons of Liberty. We're going to be shooting 223. I think we've got some bolt guns and 6.5 Creedmoor and 308, and that'll be more for the longer range stuff. But pretty impressive little setup so far. So I'm going to keep bringing you the footage, get you some close-ups of this unit and what all it is capable of. So upon arrival, we were on this awesome ranch. It was off the grid, and we had generator power, had this beautiful lake on there with this dock. You could tell it was from a time past that was extremely busy and bustling, but the guys over at Sandy Creek Outfitters had arranged this for us. So great amenities, no issues there, and what they wanted to do was a familiarization of the units, not only the Avenger, but also the Recon. So what they did is Sons of Liberty was there with their rifles, and we had Fat Boy tripods. I've never been exposed to Fat Boy tripods. We should have some on the channel here for a review here shortly. So a lot of really good contacts were made. What we started doing was working with familiarization with the controls, because they told us at about 8:30 that evening we were actually going to go hog hunting. Now, I have no experience with hog hunting or wild boar hunting or anything like that, so I didn't really know what to expect, but they wanted us to be very familiar with the controls on the actual units themselves so that we weren't fumbling around trying to find buttons and switches and everything. Now, the way these units worked is, depending on the distance, they had a user profile set up. And it was very simple. User profile 1 was 100 yard 0, 2 was 200 yard, 3 was 300, 4, 4, 5, 5. So basically, if you were given a yardage for these hogs, you would just go to that user profile and you knew you were dead zero. So I think most everyone took a nap. I was still busy trying to get some photo gear together and everything else and getting comfortable with these units. I will tell you, not having a 4 or 5 button user interface makes a huge difference, because, you know, a thermal, kind of like night vision, it's not something you're going to use every day, okay? Not for the civilian market. I mean, you're not going to be that familiar with it. If you set it down for 6-7 months at a time, let's say, you know, you've got it in the safe or something like that, and you're going to go on your hunts, you know, a couple times a year. So having it so simple, and the middle button was raised up, so you always had a good index point on knowing exactly where you were at. Also, it was very easy to focus with the top knob focus. Very easy, very incremental clicks, and I really didn't know anything about this thermal unit. Now, one of the big things is, if you're used to the regular CR123A batteries, you're going to find out that on whatever thermal unit you're using, these actually don't last that long. Thermals take a tremendous amount of power. They generate a lot of heat, and we will talk more about the heat issue later, but you will burn through a lot of batteries, and so you'll have a lot of companies that offer external battery packs and different options for that. So what you've seen from the flashlight companies is, instead of using a lot of the 123As, they're offering options now to where you have a 3500 milliamp, the 18650. I really like this because this is a rechargeable unit. It makes it really nice. These have a ton of power, like 3500 milliamps. And so the Avenger series actually uses 2 of these. So you can run continuously for 7 hours. So in a hunt, basically what we did was they had them turn us on when we got there, and you didn't have to touch them again. Now, the Recon clip-on actually uses the 123As, and it also doesn't have onboard recording, so we weren't able to get any of that footage. So we just got very familiar with the controls, getting everything set up and understanding how it was going to work at night. So what we did on the first night is we loaded straight up into the side-by-sides. These were really nice units. You guys saw one in the intro. They had racks on top so you could put a couple people up top and people in the back. Now, it was pitch black. We did have our little headlamps and all of that. We loaded up and we headed out. Now, what they would do is they would drive around, they'd stop, and they'd get up on top with some thermals and then just scan the area. If they saw some hogs or anything like that, they would have us get out. We would kind of hike a little closer, and then what we would do is we would get in a wide skirmish line, and then they would count down to 0. Now, typically when you got to 1, they'd say 3, 2, 1, and then fire, and then everybody started unloading on these hogs. It felt really, really bad for these hogs at that point, right? Because they have no idea we're there. We're seeing a great heat signature on these things, and I will tell you the resolution on these are outstanding. No issues whatsoever. However, all of the shots were pretty close. We were 100 yards and in, and while it's not always about long range, we can ethically kill these things, especially with the firearms that we were using. We were using 5.56 as well as the 6mm Max. We had a couple of those just to see how effective it was. So that was it for the first day. Now on the second day, they took us to the Texas Ranch, which was a gun range. And what we had to do was drive about 45 minutes or so. I think it was something like that. And we went to this facility and they wanted to give us a classroom session learning a lot about thermals. And I learned a ton. So for those that want to know, great. If not, you can skip forwards. But one of the things that makes a thermal unit so expensive is the actual lens, okay? What looks like the objective lens. Now, germanium is very heavy, and this glass is extremely heavy. It's heavier than you think it would be based on holding lenses and things like that, because it does have that germanium in it. However, this you cannot see through. It is completely pitch black. It doesn't matter how much light you hold through it. But the way that it works is, let's say this is the thermal unit, and if we have somebody on the other side, what it sees from ambient light from these rays doesn't get reflected through this lens, this germanium lens. However, any of the IR features, any of the IR light will pass directly through the lens, and that gets focused on the actual sensor, if you will. It is on the periodic table of elements, but you don't just mine or get them out of the ground. Now, Chris Wisecarver, who is the owner of Sport Optics, needs no introduction when it comes to optics. He is really known for his work within the optics industry. And, one of the things was when he bought into Fusion Thermal and purchased that company in Lithuania, he wanted another process in and out. But remember, it's not something that you just mine out of the ground. You actually have to take silver and you take zinc, and then what you're going to do is you're going to melt them at around 1700 degrees. You're going to put them in a centrifuge, going to liquefy that, pour it into a cylinder, and then once that cools at a certain rate, they will actually cut little wafers, and that is where that objective lens comes from. You cannot see through it. You can hold the brightest flashlight up to it. You're not going to see it or see through it, but it will let IR light pass directly through it. Just interesting properties of that material. Now, they're extremely brittle, and solid form is extremely brittle, so it's not something you want to drop or anything like that. Just a little small piece like this is like $300. But in order to polish that objective to make the lens is going to cost a total of around $1,200. So that's one of the most expensive components within the actual thermal unit itself. On all the Fusion thermals, those are actually done in Germany, and it comes from one of the mining areas there. Now, you do have other places that mine. One of the biggest world's reserves is basically going to be in China. Now, they have about 80% of that content. However, it has a lot of silicon in it. And when you add silicon in it, it is an impurity. And while they're all going to have impurities, you're going to have a higher likelihood of having more silicon than you would if you got it from elsewhere. So what they did then was they drew on exactly how those pixels worked and those sensors. There's two common size sensors, and then you also have the micron measurement. You usually have between 12 or 17, and that's basically going to give you a better resolution whenever it's giving you the display here. So I learned a lot, and it was welcome information because I didn't know about it. Some of the other things I learned is they don't like to use plastic. Plastic is an insulator. So they don't use plastic as the main body. They actually use machined 6068 aluminum out of one solid block, and those are the housings to act as heat sinks to pull that heat away from the thermal unit. A thermal doesn't do well when it starts to get really, really hot. So once we learned about the unit, if we had any questions, what we did then is we went out onto the range and we're going to shoot at distance. Now, this is where I was having the most fun. We were at a beautiful facility. We could shoot out to 1,000 yards. I started learning how to zero this unit. Also learned about collimating whenever you're trying to use a clip-on, because it's a little different than a dedicated unit. You have to actually get them looking through the same tube as your day scope. So when you use a clip-on, you need to do that first and adjust it and get everything calibrated for that specific day scope. But this is a clip-on unit, and this is called the Recon. Now, the Recon 55XR is basically going to go over the end of the scope, but all is not perfect. You have to collimate it first. And what we mean by that is you have to understand that when you're looking through this optic, you have another tube in there called an erector tube. And anytime you adjust your elevation or your windage, you're changing that erector tube angle. Well, if we just simply slide this onto the end of the optic itself, what you're going to notice is if we already have an angle on the erector tube, now we're not technically looking, because we're looking at a screen, you're not looking through it, through the center of the clip-on. So what you have to do is collimate it. So the way you're going to do that is you will confirm it, shoot it at, let's say, 100 yards, then you'll put your clip-on on and you will shoot it at 100 yards. What you're going to do then is measure that distance. Now, this sheet here is an example of a collimation chart. So if you're off, let's say, 2.5 inches. You're going to find 2.5 inches, let's say you're shooting low 2.5 inches, then you've got to add +9 up on this so that everything is lined up. So you've got to do not only elevation, but you also have to do windage correction. So while you don't have to do that on the ones that are dedicated, anytime that you throw a clip-on, that is something that needs to be done if you want to take precision shots. So once we did that, we were done for the day until hunting that evening. Now, when we got back to the cabin, what we had to do was get everything ready for about 8:30 or so. And we were running a little bit behind on schedule. They thought we were going to have time for a nap and everything, but no nap time for us. So what we ended up doing was loading up in the vehicles, driving about 45 minutes or so, and then going out to this rice paddy. I didn't realize there were rice paddies in Texas. We were in Eagle Creek specifically, and we were on an 18 to 20,000 acre farm that had a lot of rice paddies. Now, they gave everyone the option of going the second night or not, and I had a lot of editing to do, and I didn't know if I wanted to do it. Just be honest with you, I wanted to do a longer range shot on a hog, and we had Chris Wisecarver's personal, 6GT with some quality ammunition, and I said, you know what, I'd really like to take a shot a couple hundred yards. And they said they didn't really do that, but they would see if they could accommodate it. So under those terms, I said, well, sure, I'll go if the opportunity might arise. So the first thing they saw was some hogs at about 330 yards, and they lined us up on the skirmish line, and boom, we were dropping these things like crazy. Got some really big hogs on there. I'll show you some pictures of those. But then what we did is we went a little further, and it didn't take long to do this. We just had to walk around the corner, and they gave us the opportunity to shoot at one at 450 yards. And we were able to drop that. You're actually going to see this in the thermal video here. Yeah, it's splashing around, but that's it. It was done. It didn't move.
1, 2, 3. Got him.
But I realize now why they didn't want us having doing the log shots. The reason is they don't leave these hogs laying. You got to get them out of the rice paddies, and you can't drive the side-by-sides out there, so you have to walk out there and drag them back. And because they're the guides, they're not going to let us do that. So they went out with the water boots and basically came back and brought the hogs back to us. So it was an unbelievable adventure. But this wasn't so much about the adventure as it was seeing how effective these thermals were. I will tell you that the Fusion thermals are a step above a lot of the things that I've looked through. They do have a 5-year warranty on them, and it is made for the U.S. market. You're not going to have a lot of icons or different languages and things like that you've got to muddle through. This is really built for the U.S. market. And I had a really great time with that, but there's more to it. So One of the hardest things to do with a thermal is shoot it in the daytime, long range, when everything is about the same temperature. You know, it was a little over 100 degrees. We're not going out there and putting ice packs or anything like that on the actual targets. And one of the things they wanted to do was see if it was achievable to hit a 1,000-yard target, like an IPSC or some type of target, during the daytime at 1,000 yards.
Elevation was good. Off right edge.
Okay, I'm holding left edge at this point.
Impact.
Should be it. So, guys, it took 3 shots to get on 1,000 yards shooting a 6GT with a clip on, and I was able to do it pretty easily. So I think this is something that's pretty unique. It's very tough to do something like this with a thermal unit. It's the bright one far right. Wind, let's stay still, hold off left edge. You got this.
Got it. I'm gonna make this happen.
After your embargo expires, after your embargo expires, would you share?
There is no embargo. I'll give you everything. Nice. Good job. Outstanding.
It's awesome.
And so they said it was a perfect storm. We had the writers there, we had the videographer there, you got a YouTuber there. Why wouldn't we do this? And they really didn't know if they wanted to take the chance on that. And I looked through it and I said, I can see the target. It's no problem, I can make this shot. And they were like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure I can make the shot. If I tell you I can make the shot, I can make the shot, especially with a 6GT. So it took 1 or 2 shots to get the wind just right. Once I got the wind right, was able to make impacts at 1,000 yards with a thermal unit in the middle of the daytime. Now keep in mind, this was on a lower sensor size than the Avenger. We were actually using the Recon, which can't do on-screen recording. So we actually had a clip-on mounted in front of a coloscope, and I had 0 issues hitting that 1,000-yard target. Angel, our guide, I knew he was a good shooter. I said, hey, why don't you try it? Boom, first round impact right after I told him what the wind hold was. And so that should really speak volumes about how well these Fusion thermals actually worked. Now the price on these units is still going to be close to $6,000. It's a little shy of that. If you see one at a dealer, definitely check them out. If you're wanting to get into thermals and you want something that you can hunt with, or if it's legal in your state, being able to take coyotes or anything like that, I think you would be really, really satisfied. Otherwise, I need to give a big shout out to the guys over at Fusion Thermal, and I met some awesome people. The folks that I met that were writers for different magazines, different freelance guys, I'm telling you, they were unbelievable to be around, sharing that information, and gave me some ideas on how I can grow the channel a little more effectively. So I hope you guys enjoyed that review of the Fusion Thermal / hog hunting out in Texas. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'm trying to get this batch of videos done so that I can get some other videos out. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. And big shout out to all my Patreon subscribers. You don't know how much of a difference you're making, and I do appreciate each and every one of you that's watching the channel. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. That'll help me out, and please comment below. Hope you guys have a good weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.